Welcome to California in Focus. I'm David Mastio, and today we're going to be talking about the narrow passage of Proposition 1. Joining me today is the Center Square's California reporter, Kenneth Schrupp. Kenneth, tell me what Proposition 1 is and just how close was the vote?
Hey, David. Proposition 1 is a $6.4 billion bond that'll maybe cost up to $10 billion more over its lifetime and 30-year lifetime in interest that would build more mental health and substance abuse facilities and homeless housing in California. There are about 7 million ballots cast in total, but the measure is barely squeezing by with about a 29,000 vote lead. Going into this, the governor was pretty assured it would pass. Support in early polling in December was at 60%, but as the state's budget woes continue to worsen, people saw these headlines of the state facing a $50 billion deficit, a $68 billion deficit, now a $73 billion deficit, and a number that's really probably going to keep going up. People really cooled down to the prospect of voting on Prop 1. Prop 1 also faced an unusually conservative California electorate because of the Republican presidential primary, resulting in increased Republican voter turnout, and Democrats really not having a lot to be too excited about to go to the polls for.
Is Proposition 1 going to centralize control of these services in Sacramento, or is it going to leave power with the counties?
It's going to take away power from counties in two important ways. First, counties are the largest providers of mental health services in the state outside of the prison and jail system, and Prop 1 is going to require that they spend about 30% of their mental health services funding from the Mental Health Services Act, which is a tax on high-income individuals. They're going to have to use these mental health services funding towards housing interventions for individuals with behavioral substance abuse or other mental health conditions. This is important because, again, counties provide a lot of mental health services, and if they are suddenly not able to spend a third of their budget on that, this Mental Health Services Act raises about maybe $3.5 billion a year. It's pretty volatile. Then they're going to be left with no choice but to cut a lot of services. And these counties are able to do a lot of what they want within their own purview because they have a lot of flexibility on how they spend the money as long as they're spending it towards certain kinds of programs. All of this funding under Prop 1 would be done through the state government, through Sacramento, and not through the counties. So that would be the second blow to counties' sovereignty and power from Prop 1.
Is Prop 1, which is a pretty big deal by itself, an admission that all of the efforts on dealing with homelessness before it were a failure, or is this a natural build on to what the Newsom administration was already doing?
Prop 1 has to be looked at in the context of SB 43, which is a law that was passed last year, changing the state's conservatorship laws. There's a definition of gravely disabled that was expanded. For someone who's gravely disabled is someone who can be appointed to a conservatorship where the state or someone appointed by the state is overseeing the treatment and care. Commonly, you might have known someone like Britney Spears was on a conservatorship during her time of alleged drug abuse and mental breakdowns. This kind of program is going to be expanded to all of those who are unable to provide for their personal safety or necessary medical care, or who aren't able to provide food, clothing, and shelter for themselves, or have some kind of substance abuse disorder that's very severe or serious mental health illness. By expanding this definition, you can suddenly start putting a lot more people in conservatorships. Proposition 1 aims to create places for the people put into these new conservatorships to have somewhere to be sent to. Prop 1 aims to build about 11,000 new behavioral health beds at mental health hospitals and 27,000 outpatient level treatment slots. So this creates the capacity for the state to force these individuals into care. But if the state's progress in any kind of state-led homeless housing initiative is indication, who knows when these will be done and at what cost, because we still have homeless housing that was approved. I know in Los Angeles we had something called Measure H that was supposed to build 10,000 units of housing within a couple of years, and I think we've barely hit half that mark because unit costs continue to go up and up. So I don't think we're going to be getting the treatment slots we are saying that we're going to pay for. And if we do ever build that many, it's going to cost a hell of a lot more.
You mentioned at the beginning of this conversation that this was being billed as a $6 billion program, but the cost could go up to over $10 billion. Can you explain that in more detail?
Yes. Interest is very expensive on 30-year loans. Government finance experts say you might be paying anywhere from $1 to $3 in interest for every dollar that you borrow. If you're assuming use of the current interest rate used on bond issuances from the state's general fund of, I think, 3.28%, you end up with this Mental Health Services Act costing $12.7 billion. If you have higher interest rates than that, the cost goes up exponentially.
Does that get covered by the bonds, or does that get covered out of general spending for the administration, or from the administration? What I'm getting at is this going to make the budget crisis worse or better by ordering the state to borrow?
So as said, yes, California faces a $73 billion deficit for this year. It'll probably get worse. We cut our jobs count from net 325,000 to net 50,000 last year. Of that net 50,000 was probably just the state says is mostly in government and healthcare, aka also government. We likely entered a recession in 2023 with jobs. Unemployment is up. That number is going to get worse. Interest on this bond is going to cost more than the bond is issuing money for, and that's going to come right out of the general fund. What's really funny, though, is in the ballot, it says that it's only going to cost total $300 million a year for 30 years, giving you a $9 billion cost in total. But that is, if you actually follow the numbers and you see what kind of interest rate they're assuming, they're saying we're going to be paying like a 1% interest rate on this debt. And I don't think that's possible.
Kenneth, thanks for joining us today. Listeners can keep up with this story and more at thecentersquare.com.
Some people would call him a loser. He ran for state office. He was beaten. He started a business. He failed. He ran for Congress. He lost. He was nominated for vice president. He lost again. But he knew only those who never tried are the real losers. And Abraham Lincoln was no loser. Persistence. Pass it on. From the Foundation for a Better Life at Value.